Welcome to ScreenQuest, a podcast where a fellowship of film lovers and armchair movie experts plays film roulette. I'm one of your hosts, Chris Waterman, joined by Mr. Will Rotondi.
Hey, hey, how's it going?
And of course, we have the lovely festive May Finch.
Hello, hello.
On today's episode, it is our final episode of 2023, where we'll be closing out our little holiday mini film fest and talking about my personal favorite Christmas film, It's a Wonderful Life. And of course, we'll be drawing a little side quest here to kick things off. So no opener for this episode. We're just going to kind of dive right in. As a reminder, we will attempt to kind of holiday eyes or holiday fi, I don't know, the side quests, and we'll each take a stab at the topic. Oh man, this is an amazing one. So it is immersive experience where normally we'd pick a film that we would want to, live in, or like a world from a film that or TV show that we'd want to live in. So the trick to this one will be in a Christmas bend or holiday bend, I guess. Like, so yeah, take a moment and think about what holiday film or TV show, I guess, you would want to potentially exist in.
I guess I can't really double dip and say Home Alone again. Although
Sure
I
you
really
can.
wouldn't want to live in that world, truthfully. His
Yeah.
family was obnoxious, and also dealing with having to potentially murder criminals that are trying to bust into your house seems like a really crappy way to spend Christmas. So,
Or an amazing way to spend Christmas. Come on.
I mean, yeah, I mean, Home Alone too, yeah, not too bad.
Mine's a very easy pick, and it's a
Yeah.
movie that I've debated throwing on the list 2 years in a row, and that's The World of the Nightmare Before Christmas. Not just for Christmas Town though, like for all the different like worlds. Like ever since I was a kid, I'm always like, man, I want to see what's behind those other doors though. Like Halloween Town is a ball, obviously. Christmas Town is, it's cool, but like I wanted to see what some of the other places look like. So that would be my reasoning because I feel like you get to explore some really like crazy, wacky, Burton-esque like holiday worlds.
You stole mine.
God damn it, sorry.
It's fine. I'm going last, though.
Mm.
Great pick. Wonderful taste.
Cheers.
I mean, I'm just gonna have to go with the greatest Christmas movie of all time. It's got to be Die Hard. I'm not gonna be a terrorist, but I will definitely be a character in that story.
Are you
You'll
just going to
be
be like getting wasted at the Christmas party or
Yeah, probably. And I would not be Ellis. So there's like a very obvious distinction for that. So yeah, I that's probably the only thing I can really think of, man. Just a fun action adventure around Christmas time.
be the limo driver.
Yeah, that actually wasn't such a bad gig. You have like your one little thing, you knock out one dude at the very end, but otherwise you're just chilling with that teddy bear in the back seat, man, having a nice drink, waiting on John to, make his move on his ex-wife. So yeah.
yeah, Argyle's definitely got it made for sure.
Yeah.
He's chilling in the
He should have
garage.
shown up in a sequel. Why didn't that happen? Come on now.
Yeah. Even like Al Powell just has like a cameo, I think, in the sequel.
That's true. Yeah, he's like a phone a friend in the second one. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good pick. That'd
Solid.
be fun. I mean, especially like most of the hostages end up all right. It could be an entertaining thing to watch unfold,
Hmm.
less and less
True.
terrorists coming back from their search. And you're like, yeah. And then there were five. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, yeah.
Because I'm just opening myself up here. But the Grinch.
Oh, you're
Nailing
really gonna
it.
give us that tee us up like that. Okay, go
Do it.
ahead.
Do it. Do it. Do it.
Explain how you would love stealing all the presents and food and
I don't want to be the Grinch, but I want to be a tiny little Who in Whoville. That sounds so fun.
They do look like they're having a
Ah.
good time for sure.
Right? Like that's
Yeah.
a nice, weird, wacky little world. I get to be tiny. I've been going for tiny characters in D&D lately, so all
Appropriate
sorts
then.
of opportunities for hijinks when you're exceptionally small. So I want to be Who in Whoville, and I guess I don't want to like suffer too much from the Grinch, but uh probably be like seeing a kaiju in real life, so maybe it'd actually be kind of cool. I don't know.
Abominable snowman who is green.
What do you think the Who get up to like when it's not the holidays?
What the
Getting
who
ready for the
do?
holidays.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's just like it's just set up and breakdown basically. Interesting. Here I don't know if I told the story on the podcast. I don't remember. The first Grinch film I ever saw as a kid was not How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Like I was entirely unfamiliar with the fact that that was like the more famous one. So the one that I
Mm.
saw was like set around Halloween time, and
Mm.
he has like the wind like kept up in like his wagon and then like lets it out and then like the fall breezes start and like I don't remember if the Who villains or whatever you would call them are in that or not. Like, but I just have vague recollections of it, but it's kind of a cool it's kind of a cool thing. And then like years later, like I was probably 7 or 8, like I was like, oh, okay. Like there was actually like a Christmas one. They're like, yeah, that's the one, dumbass. Like that is the Grinch that everybody knows. Like, what's this Halloween thing you're talking about? But oh well. Yeah. I think Whoville would be a cool place to spend the holidays for
Yeah.
sure.
I'm thinking of an animated version too. I'm trying to remember. It's not the like 2018 one that came out, but it's the much older
Oh
one.
no, the OG, like with like the
Yeah.
famous like you're a me one, Mr. Grinch, like yeah. And I recently learned, now I'm gonna go down the rabbit hole. I can cut around this if I have to, that the Grinch like was voiced by somebody famous in the cartoon. The Grinch Stole Christmas TV. Boris Karloff. Yeah, I was like,
Oh,
Mm.
yeah.
what? Which is it's wild. I probably another fact that I'm like years behind on, but judging by the way you guys said, wow, I'm assuming I'm not the only one that didn't know that. But yeah.
Yeah.
No idea. Yeah, I'm referring specifically to the 1966 How the Grinch Stole Christmas, although the live action one is great too.
Mhm.
Yeah, the cartoon is the best version for sure, in my
Mhm.
opinion. I know like it probably depends on when you grew up, on how you would feel about that, but oh well. Well, hey, thanks for both of you guys sharing. I think those are all good choices for very different reasons. So, now we're gonna pivot to talk about It's a Wonderful Life, which is our final film of 2023. So first, some facts about It's a Wonderful Life. Released in 1946 and directed by Frank Capra. It was based on The Greatest Gift, which itself was a adaptation of A Christmas Carol. Stars James Stewart, Donna Reed, and Lionel Barrymore, and tells the story of George Bailey of Bedford Falls, whose life is recounted by angels as he contemplates suicide. George is shown to be a selfless man who's consistently put the needs of others above his own, which results in a modest life that he secretly is dissatisfied with. In a series of vignettes, we're shown that George has sacrificed money, a comfortable lifestyle, and his education in order to help the town he lives in after he reluctantly takes over a building and loan company from his father, who dies of a stroke. All the while knowing that if he does not, the town is doomed to suffer at the hands of the heartless Mr. Potter. As we enter into the present, we see George's Uncle Billy misplace a large sum of money, which is later revealed to be discovered and pocketed by the greedy Mr. Potter, the antagonist of the film. A desperate, defeated George realizes that he will face a jail, likely, and public humiliation, and contemplates suicide by jumping off a bridge. But before he can go through with it, a mysterious man appears and jumps into the freezing water, which forces George to save him. This is revealed to be Clarence, his guardian angel, who at first unsuccessfully attempts to convince George that his life is worth living through conversation. Uh, After unsuccessfully convincing George that his life is worth living, he uh, shows George a future where he is never born and where Bedford Falls has become a den of greed and misery, completely owned and run by Mr. Potter. George, realizing that he's done far more good than he's willing to acknowledge, prays to live again and rushes back through the town and ultimately back home in a gleeful state of jubilee. As George embraces his children, his wife comes back home, followed by most of the town who gladly donate money to help the man who has so often helped them throughout their lives. The film ends with a note from Clarence tucked inside a book that reads, "Remember, no man is a failure who has friends. Thanks for the wings." So, miss anything?
Nailed
Cool. I actually typed it up this time, like just to be a
it.
little more organized. It only took me to the end of the year to like try to do it less extemporaneously.
It was a
Um,
wonderful summary.
thank you. So as always, I want to start with general impressions. And May, I'm gonna start with you since you were like kind of sniffling when when we hopped on camera.
So
Um,
I usually watch the movies we talk about on this podcast, like within 24 hours, often right before the podcast. And I made that mistake with this movie because I was sobbing at the end, and my cheeks are probably still a bit red. But
it's just
yeah,
Christmas cheer.
I really liked it. I'd seen bits and pieces of it over the years, just like from being broadcast on TV so much, but I'd never sat down and watched it all the way through. And I thought that it had so many beautiful small moments of charm and humor and silliness that it made it way easier to buy into the whole kind of like angel intervention storyline than it would have been
Sure.
otherwise. And it also made it mean a lot more at the end, I think. Um, I appreciate that, like, while George Bailey is like a very selfless person, he's also clearly flawed and like just kind of an average guy that chooses to do good more often than not. And um, I really like that in a protagonist. And Mary is an angel. I don't I don't know how he yeah, I could have ended up with anyone else. I wanted to marry Mary after that movie, so
Yeah.
yeah, just very charming and wholesome, and yeah, it might be my new favorite Christmas film. So thank you for picking it, Chris.
Wow. That's high praise. I mean, like all the other stuff you said, of course, was like yes, like all of it, but wow, that's quite the compliment because it is I decided last night, like after years of kind of debating, I think like this is definitely my favorite. So, oh. Mr. Rotondi, what did you make of It's a Wonderful Life?
Oh man, I'm gonna be the Grinch on this podcast for this one.
Oh
So I
Whoa.
no.
like and don't like It's a Wonderful Life. I flip-flop on it, but it's not that I'm one way, like all the way one way or all the way the other. Um, I like it because I think it's realistic and I can understand. Um, and I apologize, I'm blanking on his name already. Good Lord. George Bailey, classic name. I should remember that. I can empathize with George for how he feels for wanting to try and take care of everybody, and then it's like it's never enough, and he always loses everything that he wants to do in sacrificing for that. But I also hate the movie because it's like it doesn't really solve the problem, right? It just sort of like tries to make the situation seem better. Like, oh, yes, it's convenient that all of his friends came with money at the end and bailed him out. And it's convenient that we're all happy now at Christmas time because it worked out. But I'm still going to be bitter and resentful about my dreams getting crushed and living with this family in this obnoxious house the next day, right? So I guess I'm the pessimist about that. But I've seen this movie a couple of times. I remember watching it when I was younger, and it's probably high school. And I remember liking it then. And I think it's just the age difference now and having grown up like 20 some years and feeling like, it's nice, but that's also kind of frustrating. And I find that George as a character can be funny at certain moments, but he can also be really obnoxious. And I think that it bothers me a little bit because I feel like I am George sometimes about stuff. And I and so getting like seeing that reflection, I'm like, man, yeah. I am kind of an ass. Okay. So I think that for me is probably why I flip-flop on exactly how I feel about the film. I mean, overall, it is like a very sweet. It's meant to try and let you know that the decisions that you make mean something, and the people's lives that you make those decisions for mean something, and that if you weren't around, it could be terrible. I mean, this could all be like, the alternate future and Back to the Future Part Two, where everything's just run down and crappy, and so it's like, those few decisions along your life could really change stuff. But I don't know. Then the like pessimist in me looks at it and says, "But why does it just have to be this one guy? Why can't other people step up if he wasn't around?" So I don't know. There's a lot of feelings back and forth about it. This is completely tangential, but I don't know which version you guys have watched. I didn't watch the original, the black and white one. I didn't realize there was like a colorized version that had come out that's
Oh,
on Amazon Prime. So that was kind of disorienting to watch it in color when I
I
knew that it
imagine. I
wasn't.
can I can imagine like I'm trying to picture what that would look like. I imagine like otherworldly kind of like
It's kind
colorized
of
stuff is
surreal, yeah. Like
yeah.
looking at people's eyes and seeing like like coloring on their eyes, and I'm like, but were you sure? I mean, granted, movies had come out later, like Rear Window and stuff, but I'm like, are you positive that's kind of how that looked? Everything was sort of very light colored, and so
Yeah.
it was interesting.
Wild. Yeah, I've
But
only ever seen the black and white.
yeah. So
But
just a message to our listeners, watch the original. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's cool when you want to try and touch something up, but watch the original. And it's definitely worth watching. I will agree on that. So
nice. Well, thank you for sharing. Yeah, as I said, like at the beginning, my favorite Christmas film ever. I choose to sort of I'm normally like the pessimist, I feel like, or a little bit cynical, and this movie kind of melts my icy heart like every time I watch it. I like to choose to believe that like his outlook has kind of permanently changed, hopefully, and he's got all the gratitude at the end about the things that are in his life that are good, and so I kind of always hope that like that's where things end up. But um, yeah, I think there's something in this performance, and like we'll definitely talk about that in a little bit, but. I read today in doing the research that he was suffering pretty heavily from PTSD, having just come back from World War II as a pilot. And that in particular, like the one scene in the bar where he's like breaking down, like and like sobbing was like real. And he just sort of was channeling all this stuff that was like floating around. He found the film to be very therapeutic, I guess. But I think it's just an all-time great performance, like, regardless of the narrative. Like Jimmy Stewart just sells the shit out of all aspects of George Bailey. Like when he's frustrated and he's yelling at his kids and his wife, it's heartbreaking to watch because it is so genuine. When he's ecstatic at the end of the film, like I believe that. Like I believe him broken down and crying. Like I like he's such a complex character, and I think that's the thing that surprised me the most. I didn't see this like the first time probably like in full till I was like 18 or 19 years old. And I think that's the thing that surprised me the most was like I was expecting the whole film to feel very cliche and just all be at Christmas and like just this like sappy thing, and like all the darker stuff in the film was a surprise to me. But I think that first like hour and 15 is so important to just establishing like who he is, and I think it makes the payoff all the more sweet. I do agree with you, Will. There's a lot of convenience in this movie, but I
Mhm.
mean, it's a Christmas film after all. So like I'm
Yeah.
usually willing to forego a little cynicism, like for the sake of I guess the holiday and like the spirit of the thing. But yeah, there are very a lot of conveniences for sure. And finally, I'll just remark, May, I agree with you. Like Mary is such a great partner to George, like at very key points in his life. I think it's kind of like, the film demonstrates having the right person there with you to like lift you up. And I don't know, you just think about like the honeymoon scene, for example,
Oh yeah.
um, can make all the difference in the world. And really, she's kind of the hero of the film in a way. She lets everybody know what's happened and kind of goes out to say, despite him being a total prick when he comes back. So, um, yes, shout out to Mary for sure, who again we'll talk about in a bit. So, I wanted to pick your brains on both what you found to be the most inspirational scene and the most devastating scene in the film, or saddest scene, or whatever you want to call it, how you want to categorize it. But so we'll start with inspirational. So this film was voted, I believe, the most inspirational film on AFI's 100 Years, 100 Cheers list that they did. And it's no surprise that George Bailey was also on their list in the top 10 of heroes, and Mr. Potter was in the top 50 villains, like in films, when those lists were released, which was, I think, like pre 2010. So, yeah, what do you find the most inspirational in terms of the scene? Like, what had your heart singing, I guess, watching this? What made you feel good?
I liked the scene where George, well, my Grinchiness will kick in too, I'm sure. But it is inspirational that for as much as I don't agree with why George does what he does, I appreciated that he was able to look at closing the doors at 6 o'clock and having what, $10 left in
True.
the vault, $2 left in the vault. And so yeah, just to be able to have that mindset of I've helped all these people that needed it, and I thwarted the asshole in town who wants to monopolize everything. I thwarted that curmudgeony old man who just won't die. That yeah. I was like, okay, that's pretty good. I'll give you that one, buddy. And then I think conversely, if we're talking about like, well, I don't want to skip ahead. Do you want me to tell you what I thought was like the most disheartening part?
We can get there in a second. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Then I'll hold on to my grinchiness.
It's hard for me to pick because, like, similarly, I was very inspired by him, like, being visibly tempted by Potter's deal with trying to essentially buy him out, hire him so he can buy the building and loan company. And just like how well Jimmy Stewart plays, like, being legitimately tempted by it, and then coming back and being like, no, fuck you.
Yeah.
Never. Um, and the, resilience and pride on display there. But like, it's not inspiring, but I would at some point like to talk about the scene where he's walking back from the dance with Mary, because it's one of my favorite like moments of on-screen chemistry, I think, between like romantic leads. Like, it's just very silly and goofy and weird, but very like authentic as well. And I enjoyed it quite a lot.
Yeah, we can definitely we can talk about that for sure. Um, yeah, for me, I think probably it's kind of cliche, but like I love him running through the street, and it's so similar to the version of, like, well, I mean, I'm sure every version of A Christmas Carol, but in particular the Alistair Sim, like, where it's Christmas morning, and Scrooge is just like almost like manic with like happiness. I just love watching, like, it's such a bit of catharsis after a really grim like prior 45 minutes or so. Just him grabbing the broken banister post and like scooping up his children, and like at this point he doesn't even know that like he's bailed out. He's just so grateful to have made like a good impact, I think, on people's lives, and to be around. And I just, yeah, I think it's, yeah, it's a little cliche, but the part that really gets me is the note that I talked about. Like if I'm not already crying, and usually I am, that, like, when he opens and sees the inscription in the book, like that's what does me in every time, of happiness, of course. Like, but I think it's a wonderful quote, and it's like, I think it's emblematic of a way that like we should all try to live our lives, right? Is to like have friends and around us, and like to create an environment where like we're always successful in some regard because we have people that care about us, and vice versa. So I think that's the pick I would make, as cliche as it is. So what about, so we can go Grinch mode now. Will, I give you permission? I will I'll open door number two. What scene did you find to be like most devastating, or like, bit of a downer, whatever, however you want to categorize it?
When Uncle Billy loses all that cash, that just absolutely is just it's gut wrenching for me because I know what it's like to you lose stuff and you're like I just had this, but to lose it was what 8,000 in the movie, which adjusted for inflation, I think I was reading would be like equivalent to like 100 grand.
Yeah.
So it's like to make that kind of mistake, considering where they were at financially already. And to have it happen right after you made fun of the one guy in town that wants to just take everything, I'm like, ah, man. And then when
The way that
George
scene's
also
played is great.
like,
Oh, sorry.
oh no, you're good. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
I was just saying, like the way that's played is like wonderful too. Like the actor does such a good job of showing that like anxiety and just utter desperation of it's there's no possible way it could be anywhere than just like some I've like there's an explanation for this. Like, oh, makes my stomach do somersaults. But I'm sorry, go ahead, man.
No, you're good. Yeah, and just to watch Potter just kind of eavesdropping, like watching him squirm around and yeah. And then, like Potter's not going to give that money back. He's just going to sit from the sideline and just enjoy the comeuppance that he thinks that Billy needs for, making fun of him. So, but I think that between that and then watching George like lose it and rough Billy up a little bit about it, just like in panic mode about like we are all screwed right now. Um, yeah, that to me is probably the low point. I mean, granted, there's other stuff too, like watching him with his family and how he reacts around his kids, which happens after that, but I think that ultimately, like when it all just turns for the worse with Billy, that's man, that's rough. So that's my pick.
It's a good one. Yeah. I yeah, the was reading again in research that one of the big points of contention, and it's something that kind of slipped through the censors. So this would have been still during the era of like the Hays Code. The villains were supposed to get their comeuppance, like that was like part of the deal, and Potter doesn't. And Frank Capra said that he received hate mail for his entire life from people that were furious that Mr. Potter's never punished. Like there's no consequences to what he does. And yeah, he said it was a sticking point for a lot of people that not only does it happen, but like we don't get the satisfaction of seeing Mr. Potter finally get his.
It's more
Yeah.
realistic.
I was about to say the same
It is.
thing.
It's one of the reasons I, love the film because it's like all the things that you think like the first time you watch it that like cliche like should happen like don't necessarily, which is it's got plenty of cliches, but but yeah. So how about you, May? What's a scene that you found to be rough?
Oh, unequivocally when he starts yelling at his wife and kids, like that my stomach just dropped because like I also know like for an older movie, like standards of like what's considered just a bad day and what's considered domestic violence like are a bit different. And I was like, I don't know what this guy's gonna do in this film. Like I was genuinely worried for her and the kids, even though I know he's supposed to be the protagonist. Um and yeah, just like that's um a night it would be hard to come back with on its own or come back from on its own, minus all the money stuff and the drunk driving and all the other things that happen. Um, so yeah, that was the hardest moment for me to sympathize with him, but also like feeling some discomfort at like the things he was saying being things that like I could absolutely think, hopefully would never ever say out loud, but like about the house, like why did we ever invest in this house even though it had been her dream, or like the worst one was like, oh, why do we have all these kids?
Yeah.
And
Oh, that's like in earshot of the kids. They're like, hey now,
yeah.
like yeah.
Yeah, and it's like you can see exactly why he's saying that at that moment because you've seen his storyline up until then, but the family has no idea, and it just it's so heartbreaking.
Yeah, I think the only thing that like softens the blow a bit, not much, but is you get the impression that the way they act around him before it's apparent that something's wrong, is you get the impression that generally speaking, he's probably a really good father and like
Yeah.
husband. So I think like, if they were tiptoeing as he's coming through the door, then it's like, oh, I don't know how good of a person he is like at home, but they're very warm towards him. So um suppose that implies that it is very out of character. But yeah, I think there is like some truth sprinkled in there, and of course some of it's like the frustration of the situation. But I think that just kind of adds to the gravity of the things that he says and makes it like all the more like heartbreaking. So yeah, that's a really good pick. Well, just to be different, just because I do want to shout out the child actor who plays young George. So in the sequence where uh young George Bailey is working at the pharmacy and is discovered that the pharmacist has accidentally filled some of the medicine with poison, which in the alternate version obviously results in the death of the child. Um, little George is pretty severely like beaten to the point where like his ear starts bleeding as he's trying to like desperately like tell him like no, I'm not going to give this medicine to, like you don't know what you do, like your son died and I know you're upset about that, but like just the way that he's like screaming and pleading like not my sore ear, not my sore ear, like oh, it does my head in every time where I'm just like it's such a great bit of acting from like a little actor. um he just sells it really well. And you know it's good at like showing like even like from a young age like he's willing to kind of endure some bad shit to help somebody else. Like it's just a nice little like gesture and like scene and moment. Of course we get a little cameo from Mary in there too, who's already kind of being ignored, like at the start. But yeah, I think that's a really it's a tough scene, because you're watching an adult just beat the crap out of a kid for one, but also like just the way the child sells it. So no,
I
you're
was
fine,
just
man.
thinking about that scene actually too, and kind of what May was talking about, and I almost feel like, and this is not to say that you should hit children, but for the sake of the plot, I almost thought that George was going to hit one of his own kids when he was wigging out.
Yeah.
Like I thought that to me would make it sense as to why he would suddenly think maybe I should just not be here anymore. And so I was actually kind of surprised that he was sort of like, I mean, I've seen some people, and I've also gotten frustrated with stuff, so I felt like he was actually kind of toned down, in terms of like verbal abuse. So I was sort of like thinking he seems to be really overreacting about some of this stuff to like want to just go out and to like, and so I know a lot of it's the buildup, but I almost feel like maybe it would have made more sense if he had been more like physically violent and to mirror what he had gone through when he was a kid by Mr. Gower. But granted, I think we're all glad he didn't
Yeah,
for
I
the
don't know if
sake
there
of
would have been
Jimmy
coming back
Stewart
from
and
that.
also just
Yeah.
yeah, but I don't know. I just that was the one thing I sort of thought seemed a bit odd for the sake of just like the character. So I don't know.
It does.
Anyway.
I think another thing that opening scene does though is it shows again just how empathetic he is because he's thinking of this guy's loss and his mental state
Mhm.
more than he thinks of the abuse injury he suffers and goes on to have like a lifelong deep connection with the man. Like that's a lot of empathy and understanding most people, most kids especially would not have.
Mm.
Yeah, I was thinking that's kind of like a Stephen King child, like in a way, where
No.
sometimes he writes kids well, but sometimes you're like, do kids have
Yeah.
complex thoughts like this? I don't know that their brain's developed enough, but it works in the scene though. Yeah, it is like it's kind of a double whammy because like yes, he's getting hit, but to your point, like your heart kind of breaks for him because like he recognizes that the reason this guy's done this is not because he's careless, but because he's like devastated, like about a loss. Yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, I promise we can pivot to happier stuff now. I wanted to get that out of the way, and I think it's important to kind of talk about the darker moments because I don't think the payoff of this film works as well if you don't sort of have those, moments that show that life sometimes can be hard. Um, so the next thing I want to talk about is the performances. So I touched on Jimmy Stewart's a little bit, and I'm kind of open it up to any other performances that you really enjoyed in the film and any aspects of them that you found to be interesting. So we can start with Jimmy Stewart if you guys want to add anything, but I kind of mentioned the pretty much all I had to say, which is I just think it's just incredibly well rounded, and I think probably fueled by some channeling some real life stuff. But
I think just generally the way Jimmy Stewart portrays joy is very contagious, and I think that's another reason I do like his like happier scenes with Mary and with his friends, just because it's like he's very he very it's very physical when he manifests joy. Like he'll be dancing and jumping around and that kind of stuff. And maybe it's just kind of like how Hollywood acting was at the time, but I really enjoy like those scenes, even if he is really good at portraying like sadness and grief as well.
yeah, like when they fall in the pool and he just starts dancing,
Yeah.
like doesn't even miss a beat. He's just like, well, we're dancing in the pool now.
I think I really liked him with it when he was the younger George, uh, with his family at the dinner table. I think that to
Yeah.
me, that interaction with his mother and father, I thought was pretty good too. Nothing specific, just in general, just the kind of the banter back and forth. Although I think it is kind of funny trying to imagine Jimmy Stewart playing like a high schooler.
Yeah, they
That was a little
took
off-putting, I think, in terms of like like pretending that somebody is very young when they're not. But
yeah, I wonder how old like he would have like was supposed to be in those scenes because like he's supposed to be like wait like 19 or 20 probably because they mentioned he's
mm,
graduated from high school. So like I wonder how old. I'm gonna go down the rabbit hole while I continue.
mm.
So he was born in 1908. And so like in the scene where the kid like when he's a kid, that's 1919 because they mentioned the Spanish flu pandemic.
Mm.
So we could suppose that's like what 9 years later or so. He actually would have been about the same age, believe it or not. I think if I'm doing
Really?
my math right.
Mm.
People looked old as fuck like back in the day. Like I think like like just more mature. Um,
I like how you pivoted a little bit. You're like old as fuck or more mature.
yeah, or maybe a bit more
Take your
nuanced.
pick, whichever one you vibe with better,
Yeah,
right?
get a little taste of I think his character in Vertigo a little bit, like the unhinged Scotty in this, like when he's
Mm.
unhinged, which people obviously didn't vibe with when Vertigo came out. They did not like Jimmy Stewart who goes from like bad to worse and stays terrible,
Oh no.
Yeah.
So I did pick up a little bit of that in this going like I think there's you see some early versions of that like where he's pulling that off. What about Mary? Like what do we like? I think it's a really fantastic understated performance like in some aspects I think from Donna Reed who is is there as it's almost like the pining. I mean, I do think it's a little unfair that they turn her into an old maid. Like, oh, if George Bailey doesn't come along, like, who's gonna marry this woman? I think that was a little unfair because she's beautiful and seems like she's got a lot going for her. But anyway,
I think she also has a very kind of weird and silly side, and she's also very independent, and I think she needed someone kind of like a Jimmy Stewart to complement that. Because if you look at who her romantic interest was at the time, Sam, he's into kind of like get rich quick stuff, and something ends up panning out for him, but like seems a lot more materialistic than her. And I feel like it's a less of a nod to like, oh, she couldn't get anyone else, and more of a just like, no, she's just a very unique person in the same way as George Bailey, and had high enough standards that she'd rather just live her own life than settle.
that's a nicer way to look at it, I guess. Like
Well,
my
I would
reaction
also
last
want to
night,
be an old maid librarian in another life. So.
especially in Bedford Falls, like there's some seems like there's some nice
Yeah.
people there, but like in that alternate reality, it's like, yeah.
I think her expressions more than anything when I mean, she does have some good lines in the film, but just watching her expressions around George, whether it's good or bad, like I think that to me, I thought was some of the best part of the performance because I could understand and I felt like she actually cared about him. I bought I bought the attraction and I bought the concern and the interest and yeah, I think more than anything else, man, when you have people that give good face, that like, I think that makes the character.
Yeah, like when he storms out of the house and, her reaction could very much be like, "What the fuck, man?" Like, and
Mhm.
instead the kids are like, something wrong with daddy, and she's like, "Yeah," like, and picks up the phone, and I think she call Uncle Billy, and it's
Hmm.
implied that she
Mhm.
gets probably the story of what's going on, and then of course goes on to, he said, arguably save the day. I mean, George is obviously like mentally kind of fixed, like spiritually kind of fixed by the end, but as you pointed out, the Deus Ex Cash App comes in and and
Nice.
it kind of fixes the problem. Karmic fate intervenes, we'll say,
That's right. It's
and I
what he
do,
kept wishing for, right? He kept going in and just making it. Well, maybe it wasn't $1 million, but
yeah,
close enough, right?
yeah, yeah. It's kind of a nice connection with the I don't know what that thing's supposed to be, a lighter, I guess, like that he's
I think
flicking.
so. Yeah.
I was like, that's a hell of a gadget. I don't know what I'm like, that's probably people like contemporary audiences would have understood, but I had no idea what the point of that thing was. But what else? I mean, there's Mr. Potter, of course, like, I guess for performances, played by Lionel Barrymore, who is just despicable and punchable. So anytime he gets told off, it's a good time.
He's like if Orson Welles and Mr. Magoo were like fused together. That's who he reminds me of. He's just, yeah, it's just like also his facial expressions too, his squintiness, and then like his like the way his mouth moves when he talks. And no, just I found something to be very like farcical about him, almost like a cartoon character, but also very malevolent. So yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it for that because I didn't really feel threatened by him, even though I know he's just monopolizing everything in town. He's taking everything he can, and he just literally will not die. It doesn't matter how much time goes by. He's like the same age.
Yeah. Um,
Oh,
yeah, he is kind of cartoonish, and as we'll talk about in a second, kind of for the final topic I have before wrap up. Um, I think it's the idea of Mr. Potter that's more chilling sometimes than the man
mhm.
like himself. But yeah, he's a little cartoonish. The only time I really like chuckled last night, kind of unexpectedly, was at one point in his sort of evolution of like the appearance of the character, he looks exactly like the Big Lebowski from the Big Lebowski. So he like rolls in, and at one point I'm like, "So you're a Lebowski, I'm a Lebowski." Like I just had that thought and it made me laugh because um
Wow.
yeah.
Awesome.
Something about the haircut and he's in the chair and stuff and the but yeah.
I want to give I think Beulah Bondi. I might be mispronouncing that. Who plays Ma Bailey a shout out for two reasons. One, just because like I like her as being like portrayed as an older lady who is just kind of wise and observant, maybe a little bit pushy, but not hysterical, not too nosy. Unlike the caricature that is Mary's mom,
Oh
who
gosh. Yeah.
I did not like.
Yeah.
Um, and secondly, because she actually looks a lot like my grandma who helped raise me,
Oh.
and that
Oh,
was also part of why I like the movie a lot. I was like, oh, now I'm thinking about my grandma who I miss, and used to make my Christmases very special. So shout out to Beulah Bondi.
Oh, that's very, very sweet. And yeah, I kind of like going back to what Will was saying. I think those early like dinner scenes and whatever, like in the house, like it's just very naturalistic. I think with everybody, like they feel like a familial unit um there, and I think it's interesting that his uh father is going to kind of allow him to make the choice, but imparts a little bit of advice or an opinion without seeming like he's trying to control George's life and destiny. And it's kind of an admirable quality. George kind of ultimately makes the choices that lead him to where he is. Not like he's not kind of like pushed into doing that. Um, yeah. Any other performances or characters you guys want to talk about before we move on to the final topic?
was her name was Violet the name of the lady who was just flirting with everybody in town. Was the
Y-
The
mhm.
because
town flirt.
Yeah.
yeah, I liked her character. I thought she was funny. I just thought she
Me
was
too.
and even like she was the comic relief I needed in this film. So I appreciated that she was there, and also then Gloria Graham for the performance. But yeah,
Her
got to give a
trajectory,
shout out to Violet.
is interesting for sure. Like, I think, um, not much to remark on the character other than to say it was kind of like a little tip of the hat, to the Capra family, but, um, I don't know why I'm blanking on their names. So I'm gonna look at the character list really quickly. Mm, The Italian family. Um, why am I not seeing them on this list? Oh well. The Italian family, though, is supposed to be the Capra family, and the way that they draw the connection is there's a goat that is in the car when George helps them move out, and
Yeah.
like Capra, like like goat. So that was kind of like his little tip of the hat, and I guess he channeled a lot of his experiences with his family immigrating from Sicily and wanted to sort of tell this like story about working class and why you need somebody to stand up for you, and like it's kind of cynical about the American dream a little bit, and
Which I
that's kind
love.
of a segue to my final topic, which is how unsettling is it that the sort of nightmare scenario of Potter's Field or Pottersville or whatever the hell it's called is basically the world that we live in now. Like it's kind of wild, right? That like,
Hmm.
hey, this is what happens if you don't have a George Bailey, and really just the message of the film is kind of like a failed dream that we all live in now. Like, and it's a little depressing, I think, but also it's kind of amazing that a movie made in 1946 like said, hey, like this is how it should be. This is where we could end up, and like that's where we ended up. Um, Yet, we still maintain hope. But how do you guys feel about that? Did you pick up on that? I'm sure you did. You guys are both bright people, but
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you see a lot of stuff culturally, or at least in internet culture, about like, oh, supporting small business, but it's like to the point where like a lot of small business is kind of like artisan or luxury consumer goods, and it's such a small market, and it's kind of like, yeah, I can't think of like a small business that is also a corner. Well, it's hard to think of any small businesses that are like huge cornerstones of the community or provide vital services.
yeah, it's a lot of boutique stuff, you know. Um, like one of our favorite like things in Springfield is like there's a little like a grocery store that is it's between third and fourth. Um, it's awesome. Like it's like one of our like we would go there like for like essentials if we forget something like on a main grocery trip or just like realize we're out of something. Run by the nicest people, but like that kind of thing is rare, Like if you're
Yeah.
not a chain grocery store, like you probably don't it's a hard market to go into. So I think that's a good observation. I think like affording a house too, like is a big topic of conversation these days.
For sure.
And sort of the conglomerations, like these big companies that are like just own all of the homes now and just want to turn it into a
Mhm.
renter's like nightmare where you have no control over like the prices of like what rent are, and you can't afford to buy a house because like home values are skyrocket because like a few companies own like all the stuff. Like that just felt really real, and like I'm like, wow. It's a
Yeah.
way that I think the movie's aged really well.
Or the commentary on like the only affordable homes being very shoddily constructed and constantly falling apart. And yeah,
Yep.
I've experienced that. I lived in a luxury apartment for almost a year, quote unquote luxury apartment, that had a leak in the bathroom ceiling for a month. When a month before they finally fixed it, and I was reporting it like daily.
Yeah, it's
And other
ridiculous.
terrible conditions. I also had like a snake get in. There was no pest control. Anyway, not luxury living by any standards,
Mhm.
but I was paying the same as like other luxury apartments.
I think the other thing that is was kind of interesting is sort of the opposite ideal that Mr. Potter has, where like, oh, these people aren't entitled to like a home because like they just aren't working hard enough. Like, it's in their control. Like they're not saving enough. They're not working hard enough. Like, if, they just really wanted it, they could have it, and like not acknowledging sort of the wealth disparity and like that they're put in a like unwinnable situation. Yeah, that was very, very smart. I think knowing that the movie is made by a person that came from a family that had, immigrated within a generation, like was probably very helpful in telling that story. And I think it's why it kind of shines in the way that it does, like outside of course, like the heartwarming Christmas messages, like some of the cynicism of the movie. There you go. Well, see, it's not all it's not all sunshine and
Yeah,
rainbows.
there you go.
There's some truth, some truth there.
I think the only thing that I didn't mind about the alternate universe was the burlesque place in downtown.
Yeah,
That's okay. You can
well,
keep that. You got to have a little bit of
attitude
fun, man.
attitudes are
Yeah,
a little
come on.
different back then,
Yeah.
Yeah, as long as they don't randomly jail the performers.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was
Uh,
wondering about the jitterbug sign. I was like, what is that? And it's
Ah,
like apparently it was like a
mm.
dance that was just like banned like in like classy establishments. So Jitterbug Welcome was like, yeah, you can get a little naughty on the dance floor in this
Ooh,
establishment, it's fine. I was
it's
like, oh
dirty.
nice.
It's dirty dancing before. Okay, I got
Yeah.
you.
I did have another thought. I don't know if we're getting to final thoughts yet,
Yeah.
Chris.
Oh yeah. Go for it.
Okay. And that's just that like my curmudgeonly thought on this movie, and it's one that I had before seeing the whole thing, and I still kind of do, even though I do like it a lot, is just that like it is a kind of a weird um portrayal of like depression and suicidal ideation, and that it's not really rooted in any like understanding we now have with mental health at all. And obviously
Mhm.
there's angels in it, suspense of disbelief, but I think it's fair noting that like yeah, suicidal ideation is a lot more complex and harder to fix than just being like, but you don't want to, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I don't even know. When would like modern psychology and like therapy like have really like started and been in the like popular like I don't know much about like the history of psychology. Like I roughly know when Freud was kicking about and some of his contemporaries, but I'm sure like the idea of psychology existed. I just don't know how much like would have been talked about. Like so that is a fair point for sure. It's a lovely sentiment that
Yeah.
your guardian angel can show up and be like, hey bro, like life would suck without you. You cool? Yeah, I'm cool. Like, um, but yeah, suspend your disbelief, I suppose. Um, yeah, any other final thoughts, Will?
I do
Hunter?
like the idea that you could see what life would be like without you around to compare it. And so that you could get like an actual like moment of being grateful for what you did have, even if what you did have wasn't what you wanted, that it could be better than the alternative in some places. Or just to kind of have an idea of like how much of a difference you could make in people's lives. I think that was probably when I watched the movie the first time, that was the takeaway that I thought would be the most interesting. But again, you can't necessarily, unless your friends tell you how much they mean or that you mean to them and they mean to you, but people don't always do that. So,
Uh,
um,
Will, your friendship means a lot to me.
oh, thanks, man. Sweet.
There you go.
And his
Will,
little grinchy heart grew 3 times that day.
because you are lukewarm on the movie, fuck you. Sorry. Friendship's over. Friendship's over.
No.
Oh, that's
I'm
awesome.
kidding. I'm kidding. I love you both.
Just punch
That's
him in the face while
awesome.
you're at it, Chris.
Well, I don't have that kind of, well, I don't have a vehicle right now from the
Yeah.
dealership, but I was gonna say I don't have that kind of time, but I also don't have the means to do it. So
Yep.
maybe I'll mail you like a Jack in the Box, like with a punching glove in it. So you're like, "Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da." uh, nah, man, I love you both. Or there's also, there's the alternative, like there's a Beavis and Butthead episode like in the OG like run where it's this story exactly, except that like when they're shown what that where are they from? Astoria or something like that. No, that's the Goonies. Anyway, wherever they're from, like life is just awesome for everybody. Like the principal's got all of his hair and he's happy and not stressed out. Like it's very funny. Like they're just showing like what life would be like without them, and it's like great for everybody.
That would be my fear. See, I would never take up that deal because I'm like, I don't want to know.
You've enriched plenty of people's lives. Come on now.
Okay, well, thank you. I may have made others far poorer, so
Yeah. Well, hopefully they deserve it. Like I don't know, but
You win some, you lose some. You got to learn, so it's okay.
yeah.
well, yeah. Any other like final thoughts before we move to our wrap up segment? Okay. Well,
Mhm.
the final segment for 2023 is a bit of a cheesy one, but I thought it'd be kind of nice, similar to like sitting around the Thanksgiving table, where we could look back and reflect on just literally anything in your life from this year. Could be related to cinema, could be outside of cinema that you're grateful for. So anything like in your life that you're grateful for. And I'm gonna do like a bonus one. So I'm gonna do something in the world of film, but I'll pick something outside of that.
I've got a couple I'll toss in the pile. I had a family member that had a medical emergency recently and turned out to be like surprisingly better after the hospitalization than most people would in that situation. So grateful that they're still around and grateful that if you looked at them, you would not have thought that the emergency they had even happened. So, it's miraculous sometimes what the human body can deal with and still bounce back. So, and then on a lighter note, if we're talking about television and film, to switch gears and not be Grinchy and talk about what I think is incredibly wholesome, I finally started watching Bluey, and I cannot get enough
Aw.
of that show. I freaking love Bluey, and Bluey's little sister, Bingo, is freaking adorable. I will probably never have kids, but if I had kids or I had a kid, I would want Bingo to be my kid. Not that I want an anthropomorphic dog child, but I just, that character is, oh my gosh,
Now
so
I kind of
stinking
think you
adorable.
do. The way that you
Yeah,
got real defensive there.
yeah, like just to
Uh,
throw it out there, you could
Bluey is very cute, and it's definitely like the show I wish I had in my childhood.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, I was gonna ask if you're ready, so perfect.
Yeah, I spoke, so I signed myself up. I have a movie and personal one that are linked. Um, a whole bunch of friends and I went to go see the Barbie movie this summer, and it was a lovely experience. I cried. I thought it was a great movie and had like a lot of interesting and nuanced things to say about how you relate to one another, both in relationships and just as friends. And it sparked some of my local friends to start having like girls' nights, which hadn't really been a thing before. And so I feel like I've gotten a lot closer with my girlfriends in town, and that's been a like very crucial source of support and affirmation and love for me since then. And that's been just a really big light in my life. As has the person I've been seeing the last few months, which also kind of came out of that movie. But yeah, Alex, if you're listening to this, very grateful for you.
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, Alex crawled out of the screen, out of the world of Ken and Barbie, and he rollerbladed across the auditorium and took May by the hand, did a little twirl, and then absconded with her. We were worried for a day or two, but it all worked out. It's not what happened at all, but it's a cool story
No,
anyway.
I'm going with that now. I'm not correcting you. That's canon.
Oh, that's really, really sweet. And a great example, yeah, that was like one of my like highlights of this year was just getting all dressed up together and like rolling,
Yeah.
what was it, like 12 or 15 deep, something crazy like that,
Mhm.
for tacos and Barbie. It was hot, but still a good time.
Oh, I was sweating in my pink dress.
Oh, yeah. So for my movie example, no surprise there. I'm positively thrilled that like we got one of the best Godzilla, if not the best Godzilla
Mhm.
movies like ever in this year. And I see it's being released in black and white in Japan, so I hope we get it in the US because I totally go see it again. Um, but yeah, it was just it's a franchise that I've loved since I was probably 5 years old. It's just kind of fun to like see it still going, and obviously it was going for years and years before I was even born, right? 54 came out. So it's just cool to see something persist that and still have something interesting to say, right? In the age of like Marvel and things like that, to not just make a blockbuster that is sort of like empty and just about putting butts in the seats and selling tickets. Like as far as that personal life, like honestly, watching the movie and what inspired me to do this topic at the end of the year was like I had sort of a George Bailey uh, reminiscing kind of experience last night after I finished it. Yeah, I'd had a bourbon or two.
Mhm.
Where like I just like I
Did you talk to
realized,
an angel?
yeah, no, not I didn't have that much bourbon. Um, but I just, I realized that like overall, like I'm very fortunate in my life, the people that I have in my life, the job that I have, like I have so much to be grateful for. Not which of least of which is this podcast. Like doing this with you guys has been such a thrill and a source of creative outlet, and it's just something I look forward to like week after week. And I really appreciate the both of you, and I appreciate the podcast and listeners. I appreciate you, like genuinely. I know we're not the biggest podcast on the internet. Joe Rogan probably has one or two listeners above us at least, as does Mark Maron. But nonetheless, like I really enjoy doing it, and it is a great source of joy in my life. And you both are responsible for that. So thank you.
Mhm.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
And you are welcome.
Yeah.
Damn right.
You're like about time you said it. Jeez.
Yeah,
Um,
jizz.
and I have one more question to pose to you before we put a button on 2023. So, audience, we will be taking a couple months off so we can reevaluate and maybe like reconfigure the podcast. Don't worry, you'll get plenty of Screen Quest in 2024, but we will have a bit of a hiatus. And my question to you is, would you like to draw our card now and leave the audience in suspense for like 2 months, just like a television show? Or do you want to wait and draw the card later?
Oof.
Draw it, draw it,
You want to
draw
see
it.
what our first film of 2024 is going to be?
Hell yeah, let's do it.
Okie
I was
doke.
on the fence until Will started chanting and I crumble with peer pressure, so.
Slap or slow clap. Clap, 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 clap,
Clap,
clap,
clap,
clap,
clap.
clap, clap. All right. So let's see what our film is upon our return. Triumphant
Was the book
return.
better? Shit.
That'd be
Actually, that'd be
perfect.
great. Let's read Dune, guys.
Okay.
Woo! You know what? Look, I'm telling you right now, if it's Dune, oh yeah, I'm game.
It is gonna be a milk or wine,
Mm.
and I just need, in classic fashion, I have forgot to pull up the spreadsheet. So
Beavis and
for
Butthead
our
do
audience
America.
members, milk or wine is our category where we're going to debate whether a film has gotten better or worse over time. And Will, my man, you get
Yeah,
the
boy.
honor of our first 2024 film, which I kind of love because I was thinking that after the holidays settled down, I have a little more time. I was going to do just a marathon of this director's work because he's my all-time favorite director. And there's so many bangers, not least of which is North by Northwest
Oh
by Alfred
yeah.
Hitchcock, starring the incomparable Cary Grant in one of his best roles. This movie is just so much fun. It's an adventure. It's kind of a spy thriller, chock full of humor, and it's got all the things that make a great Hitchcock film. Domineering mothers, memorable finales, and then of course that crop duster scene that everyone's seen a million times.
Yeah. It's got a
So
pretty
Will,
awesome soundtrack too.
Bernard Herrmann, yeah, really it's just
Yeah.
got all the elements. This is like Hitchcock at the top of his game for sure.
Yeah.
What made you nominate this for Milk or Wine? Out of curiosity, was it kind of like a slam dunk where you wanted to just be like, well, of course, it's aged like wine, or do you actually think there's a debate to be had? And I mean that as a genuine question.
It's like, do you think this movie is also shit, Will?
No, 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 not at
No,
all.
I would never say that about North by Northwest. No, I think partly because it's been a while since I've seen it, but also because I think that it's always fun to talk about some of the classic, kind of what you were saying, where it's action, spy, it's from a famous director, and so I sort of like to go back and look at some of the classics and just kind of nitpick maybe, or reinforce the point that, yeah, they did it great the first time. Don't reinvent the wheel again with anything else, or talk about how we've seen how it influences culture since then. But I mean, I like it for all the reasons you listed, man. So I'm looking forward to watching it again.
Funnily enough that you that picked this for the category, because it occurs to me that this is actually the third time he made the same movie essentially because he was dissatisfied with his
Hmm.
prior attempts. So the first was the 39 Steps and then Sabotage, where it essentially was the same plot where it's like a wrongfully accused man who's caught up in a spy or like espionage like ring and misidentified as and like each of those has a finale that happens somewhere kind of memorable. So it's kind of an awesome pick for that because Hitchcock himself was like, milk, milk. And then finally, satisfied. Like
There
on
wasn't
the
a fourth
third.
attempt.
Well, he died probably before he
Oh.
could do it again, but like,
I'm not as
yeah.
up on my Hitchcock history as you are.
Well, he died like in the 80s, but like early 80s. But yeah, I think he
Well,
either
I knew he
was.
was dead.
Yeah. Well, no, 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 no. I didn't. Sorry to clarify. I didn't want to imply that he just died like right after making North by Northwest. He went on to make some other stuff, but I'm assuming that like he either was satisfied or just didn't get the attempt to take her further. Like he was just one of the directors that I think was kind of driven a little insane by technological limitations and how it is like when you put something out into the world and you're like, damn it, if I could do it all over again, I would do it different. I think it's just that kind of like artist
Oh yeah.
plague. So, well, I'm excited to watch it. And this you've solidified for me before we record sometime, we'll probably resume putting episodes out in March. So before we record in February or early March, I here's my sign from Clarence. Like, I want to watch Hitchcock, Clarence. That from above that like it's time
Ding,
to
ding,
go
ding,
back and
ding.
do a whole mess of Hitchcock films. So May, since you're in the same town, if you want to get in on any of that,
Oh
I have an
hell yeah.
embarrassing collection of Hitchcock films. So
Absolutely.
great. Well, I wish you both a happy holidays. Audience, I wish you a happy holidays. Again, you can expect to see us back sometime in March, and you can expect us to talk about North by Northwest. But until next time, we love you.
Bye,
Bye.
guys. Happy
Bye.
holidays.